Hello, listeners. Welcome to Marie Lives the Horror. This is episode 10 of the series of True Paranormal Ghost Stories. In honor of it being episode 10, I am bringing you a special edition episode of this series. I gathered a compilation of different experiences that my own family members have had. If you have kept up with all of my episodes so far, let me extend a thank you to all of my listeners, as I really appreciate your support. So without further ado, step into my horror chamber as we live the horror together. Number 1. I'm not in control when I sleep. These different experiences are some of the first and earliest creepy memories that I have from when I was about 5 to 7 years old. This is when I first started sleepwalking. I never used to remember actually sleepwalking. I only remembered as if it was a dream, and only after someone would tell me what happened. The first sleepwalking experience that I can remember was when I was locked inside of a closet. My mom had woken up because she was hearing banging on the walls coming from my room. This was me trying to find a way out of the closet. My mother told me when she walked into my room, she opened the closet and found me sitting on the floor, facing her. She grabbed me by the hand and took me back to bed. My mother had become used to having this happen to me, so she already knew what to do. All of these events happened during my childhood living in Puerto Rico. My sister and I shared the biggest room in the house. We had bunk beds in the right side of the room, and the room itself was in 2 separate sections. The first section of the room had a really big mirrored closet door, and the front door was next to it. Now, in this house, my sister shared with me that she would wake up in the middle of the night, very frightened, and said that she would see a figure. The figure would be standing at the foot of her bed. She would see it in multiple places, multiple times, across the room, outside of the window, or in the corner of our room. The figure was as tall as our bunk beds, at least 8 or 9 feet tall. It had a big, round head with big, evil-looking red eyes, as he was always wearing a long cape. I myself would never see this figure. It was only my sister. She would see this thing at least 4 or 5 times while we lived in this home. I have also sleptwalked in many other homes. One event happened when we were at my godfather's house. We were staying in the guest room, and for some reason, I woke up, stood up on the bed, and tried to walk towards the bedroom door to leave the room. I fell backwards somehow onto the floor, and then I woke up and got myself back in bed. It hurt, but not that bad, and I was not injured. The next time I had another sleepwalking experience was back in my childhood home in Puerto Rico. I remember that day I had gotten a new old-style fashioned wooden dresser that had a space in the middle to put a TV inside of it. So during the day, we were making space for it, and we had to move the old table that was in my room. During the day, this table was left in the middle of the bedroom. That night, everyone was sleeping, and I got up to sleepwalk. And I remember specifically making note of being aware that this table was still in the middle of the room, but it wasn't actually there anymore. So I then attempted to go around this piece of furniture that I thought was there and walked around the lining of the wall in my room. I ended up falling over all of the toys that were against the wall. I ended up falling very hard, face first on the ground, which this essentially woke me up, and I felt a rush of liquid coming down my face. Prior to this, I had no memory or recollection of ever sleepwalking, only waking up because I hit the ground. After I woke up, I walked out of my room and walked down the hall into my parents' bedroom and woke them up. They turned on the light, and they saw that my face and sleep clothes were covered in blood, and I also apparently was bleeding so much from this fall, I left a trail of blood everywhere. The blood was down the hall and on my parents' doorknob and on the floor. I remember my parents sitting me down on their bed, trying to stop the flow of blood as my nose had been broken, and I was shaking severely from head to toe. For weeks after this, I had a huge bruise on my face from the broken nose. That was the last time I remember sleepwalking in that particular home. The next place I remember sleepwalking was in my grandmother's home, but only because my brother was there and had witnessed what happened. I had gotten up and started just walking around the room we were sleeping in, but nothing bad happened. I walked around and then on my own, I laid back down to sleep and nothing else happened. That was about the last time I slept walk while living in Puerto Rico. I don't know if it was related to anything paranormal, even though I would sometimes get very strange feelings in that house, but it could have been from me being so young and impressionable. However, my sister did have multiple times where she would wake up very scared in the middle of the night. But I never saw the figure that she would claim she saw. I definitely did believe her, because she gave so much detail about this figure, and I don't think at such a young age she would make something like that up. I remember her also mentioning to me that she would see the same thing multiple times in different places, which I thought added more validity to this claim. The older I got, the less I would have sleepwalking episodes, at least when it came to moving and walking. But my now husband would tell me of times that I would sit up in bed and start talking to him. And I would answer questions he would ask me, or even on occasion, I would get physical with him. Again, I would never remember doing these things until after my husband would tell me what I did, and I would think it was only happening in my dream, even though I was doing it in real life. He told me of a time when the experience of me talking in my sleep first started happening. We had moved temporarily into my mother's house, and one night when we were sleeping, out of nowhere, I woke up yelling at my mother's dog to get out of our room. But my mom's dog would not be there, which I thought was maybe just an automatic reaction from this being something I often did throughout the day. Another experience that he recalled was one time I once again sat up in bed, but this time I was yelling at him and started to hit him. He told me he could not understand what I was saying, that it was all mumbling noises coming out of my mouth. This freaked me out a lot because I never knew what I was saying to him, and that I would look directly at him with my eyes open while I did it. This would continue to happen multiple times during the 11 years of our marriage. He never witnessed me sleepwalking, at least, so I knew I no longer was doing that. The last, most recent experience I had with talking in my sleep was the night I woke up screaming. My family had just moved into our new apartment. We only had a mattress on the floor of my room because we were still waiting for the bed frame to be delivered. Now, I pretty much most of the time sleep on my stomach. So as we are laying there sleeping, I randomly out of nowhere woke up screaming. The reason I was screaming was because I literally felt like I was being pulled from underneath my bed covers towards the bottom of the mattress. I woke up because I felt the movement of being pulled, and I swore that I was halfway down the bed. As this happened, I woke up, jumped up startled, looked around and thought to myself, there's no way this is happening, and forced myself to go back to sleep. The next day, I was surprised that I actually remembered what happened to me in the night. I asked my husband what happened last night. He said he wasn't sure, but I just woke up screaming. I told him, yeah, something pulled me. He said, no, you jumped up in bed and just started screaming. But the only reason I was screaming was because I swore I felt the movement of being pulled. Nothing else happened after that night in the apartment so far, even though sometimes I get eerie feelings. But I do listen to a lot of scary podcasts at night, so that may be why. Number 2. Conversation of different experiences. Here's something that my father shared with us. From my father. I remember when I had first come back from living in Puerto Rico. I was living at my son's house, and I went outside to smoke a cigarette. And as I'm sitting on the steps, I started to get chills all up and down my body. I looked towards where my son's car was, and I saw my father leaning on the hood of his car. Now, this is, of course, impossible because my father had already passed away some time ago. But I could see him clearly with my 2 eyes. He was not a hazy, transparent figure. He was completely vivid and solid. Then he stands up and turns around, starts walking away and heads towards the backyard, and slowly started to disappear. As he was disappearing, my sister was pulling up into the driveway. I told my sister about what I experienced, and she told me, "Oh, I can feel him all the time." We thought maybe he was waiting for her to arrive there and was just making sure she got there safely, since I had not seen her since I got back from Puerto Rico. I have also seen my now passed on wife. She is always with me. I have seen her on multiple occasions, and for some reason she is very angry with me. This mostly happens when I'm alone. It's my theory that she is angry with me because I am alone. Ever since she passed, I had become a loner. I have heard, sometimes in my kitchen, the sound of pots and pans moving around in the cabinets. It's like the sound of her looking for something. There was one day I am cooking in the kitchen, and I look towards the patio, and she is standing clear as day, looking at me with an angry expression, as if telling me, "Why are you here alone?" But I know she is there for me and just looking out for me. In response to my father, I have also had an experience with your passed on wife. I think she visited me and my son when he was just a toddler, maybe 2 years old. This was sometime after she had recently passed. It was one day I was taking a shower getting ready for work, and I have my door open so I can listen to what my son is doing. All of a sudden, I hear him say, "La nena, la nena." The girl, the girl. So I start thinking he is talking about my friend's daughter that we spend a lot of time with. And I'm thinking how cute it is that he is thinking about her. So when I got out of the shower, I walked over to check on him, and he is talking to someone in his room, and he is saying, "No, wait." He laid down on the floor and looked under his bed. And then he says, "Ita." Now, Ita is what his grandma wanted to be called by him when she was alive. But that is not a name that my son, who is only 2 years old, is going to remember to say. He repeats again, "Ita." And I automatically begin crying. He continues talking and playing around, and I am sitting there freaking out. I work up the courage to speak with who I think is his grandma in his room playing with him. I call her name and tell her she is welcome here in my home any time, and that I know she is taking care of us. But I also told her to not allow for me to see her because it would scare me to death. Please do not show yourself to me. I cannot handle that. My son never did say the name again after that. Number 3. I saw a phantom green light. This story is of an experience my older brother had during his younger childhood. For privacy reasons, I will refer to him as AJ. He was around 12 to 13 years old when this happened to him. Live interview. The day this happened, it had been a normal one. Nothing eventful really happened, and nighttime came and my parents did their normal routine of putting us kids to bed. During the night, I was woken up because I saw what appeared to be a glowing green light. This light was coming from my window. My first thought was maybe this is one of my friends shining a light through my window trying to wake me up. The apartment where I lived at the time was 2 stories. The living areas, kitchen, dining room, and living room, were on the first floor, with the bedrooms and 2 bathrooms on the second floor. My bedroom faced the front of the apartment that was on the second floor. My friends would sometimes throw small rocks to my window and invite me to sneak out. This happened often, so that was my first thought when I saw this green light. I got up and walked over to my window and looked down at the sidewalk in front of the apartment and saw absolutely no one there. I told myself, what the hell is going on? I brushed it off and got back into bed. As I am lying there, I hear something outside of my window. It sounded almost like two distinct knocks on my window. I got up to look, and again, I am thinking, this is one of my friends doing this. During this time, one of my friends, Johnny, who was very tall and athletic, would sometimes climb up the gutter railing to the side of the apartment and knock on my window. I looked towards my window, and the green glow was again there. But I saw nothing and no one. At this point, I screamed. My mother came into my room and I told her what I saw. She did not believe me at all and told me that I had probably had a nightmare. But I know I was not dreaming. I was fully awake when I got up because of the green light. I know what I saw, and until this day, I will never forget this green glow that I saw. I am now in my 30s, and it's an experience I have never forgotten. I am skeptical, though, as to what I saw. It could not have been the cliche, quote-unquote, aliens or anything like that. And for a while, I sort of believed maybe it was my friends playing around with me. It was really weird because if it was my friends, I usually always caught them messing around with me outside, which we used to play games like that with each other all the time. But this was something I had never experienced before, and as far as I knew, neither did any of my friends. The source of the green light was not coming from any particular source. It was not coming from anything that was outside. It was just my entire window illuminated by this green light. The moment when I saw it and I screamed, I do not even remember why I screamed. I was not afraid or anything, but my reaction as seeing this light was to scream. Right after this happened and my mother checked on me, I went back to bed and fell straight to sleep with no problems. I never experienced the green light after that one time. It really was one of the strangest things I have ever experienced. Number 4. The night my brother saw the devil. The following events were relayed to me by one of my family members about an intense, crazy, supernatural experience that her brother had. For privacy reasons, we will only name him throughout the story as Jay. Before I begin this story, I just want to mention that even before we even started the interview, something strange happened. Right before my family member, which I will name T, was going to start the story, the wind picked up rather intensely. We were recording this interview on my outside porch, and we both felt this really strange, strong wind blow through the porch and rustle the trees in front of my house with a lot of strength. We both stopped and looked at each other, sort of frozen, and we both had goosebumps. Now, I am not sure if it was related to the following story, but it was definitely a scary coincidence. Now, in T's own words, this is the story about the night her brother Jay saw the devil. T. I have to start this story from the very beginning of my brother's life. Literally. My brother was born on February 13th, Friday night. Yes, Friday the 13th. My mother actually wanted to name him Jason, but they decided in the end to name him something else. Jay has always been a rather careless person who would take a lot of risks, but he has the biggest guardian angel. There was one story that my mother told me of when he was a baby. She had put him down to take his nap, but for some reason, he did not want to go to sleep. He refused and refused and continued to cry and cry. So finally, when she went into his room and got him, not even 10 minutes after they left the room, she heard an extremely loud boom. The ceiling fan had fallen on top of his crib. If she had not gotten him when she did, it would have fallen on top of him. He was only months old when this happened. After he was much older, I want to say around 21 years old, he got into some trouble, and so my mother sent him to live with my grandma in Puerto Rico. So naturally, living with my grandmother, he did whatever he wanted to do, and during this time, he had his own car. He went out one day in his car, and as he was stopped at a traffic light, he got impatient and did not want to wait for the light to change. He decided to change lanes, and at that exact moment, a big semi-truck rammed into the vehicles that were in the lane he was just in, which one of the drivers ended up being killed. If he would not have decided to move at that moment, it would have been him. During a different time, he got into a car accident, went unconscious because his face actually ended up breaking the windshield. He ended up hospitalized, but he survived, and he has just always been taken care of in crazy situations like this. Now, he is also rather a vocal person when things don't go his way. He used to say things like, fuck this and fuck that, and God is doing this to me, and F the devil, and things like that. So because of the way he used to talk about God, we believed he has had a lot of paranormal things happen to him. So pretty much all his life, he has created his own bad karma. Every time something would go wrong for him, he would blame God for his problems and also mention the devil a lot. So with that said, around 2013, he had gotten this girl pregnant, and due to some issues, they got separated. He ended up getting into some more trouble and actually ended up in jail. When he got out of jail, he was put on house arrest. He then came to live with me and was already dating another girl. Sometimes his new girlfriend, who actually ironically is his wife now, would come over to spend time with him. But he had had a lot of bad energy due to the problems he was dealing with during that time, and he was not doing anything positive to change his misfortunes. During this time, when he was living with me, I would smoke weed before going to sleep, So when I went to sleep, I was knocked out. This one night, I went to sleep and I left my brother in the living room. And I remember having a dream where I was hearing a lot of negative arguing, a lot of people fighting and screaming. The next morning, my brother approached me, feeling very uneasy about something he experienced. He then asked me if I heard a lot of yelling last night. I told him I did hear something, but I thought it was just a dream. He told me no, it wasn't. His baby's mother had called him and they got into a really bad fight over the phone. He got very negative with her and started yelling at her, saying that she was not going to do this to him and he wasn't going to jail because of her, and then boldly stated, "Even if the devil showed up in front of me right now, I will mess him up too. F the devil, let him come for me." Afterwards, it was over, and a while passes. He ends up falling asleep on the couch in the living room. Suddenly, in the middle of the night, he wakes up because, as he puts it, he felt like the house was rumbling, like trembling, and it is extremely hot inside the house. He then said he saw the devil, quote unquote, in the living room. He could not move. He was stuck on the couch like if he was tied down, and he heard people screaming like they were being tortured and in agony. And everything was burning hot, to the point that it looked like the walls were melting. This being that had appeared in my living room spoke to him, stating he wanted to take him, specifically saying, "I'm here. What the fuck are you gonna do about it now?" He couldn't say anything back to it, and so began praying in his head, rebuking what he was seeing. Eventually, everything calmed down and went back to normal. He was absolutely terrified, and he remembers how hot it was and the people screaming in pain around him. Now, to him, this was no dream or nightmare. He was wide awake when this happened to him. After this, he stayed up all night praying and would not go back to sleep. As he was telling me this story, I could see how still terrified he was to even tell me what happened, and I believed he experienced this for real. So finally, after so long of bringing on so much negative energy to himself, something happened that he had no choice but to humble himself. Later on, I thought maybe this is what he needed to experience in order to finally make a decision to take his life in a more positive direction. And he did. He really changed for the better and got his life back to normal. And he even now regularly attends church. Nothing else to this level happened to him again. But recently he told me of something that happened during Halloween. His now wife had put up decorations, and one of the decorations was a talking skeleton that had at least 5 pre-recorded sayings on it. She had hung it up in the kitchen. One night, he went to the kitchen to get water, and the skeleton, which is motion activated, had turned on. But it was not saying any of the recorded messages it was supposed to say. He didn't tell me what it was saying, but it was speaking to him. The messages were directed at him. After that, he took down all of the Halloween decorations, and didn't allow for his wife to decorate for Halloween at all. Number 5. Almost choked by an evil spirit. I spent a long time gathering all these different experiences that a particular aunt of mine had. The interview was kind of all over the place since we had not talked in a while, but she has had some very interesting stories to share with me. Although there was some that she didn't remember all the details too, since they happened so long ago. My aunt, who I will only name as Y for privacy, is very in tune with the paranormal, even though she wishes that she wasn't, since she is very afraid of it. In the more recent years, she has not noticed so much activity around her, since she has tried her best to completely ignore it. Although Y also sometimes has the ability to predict a future event and gets very strong feelings when something terrible is going to happen. So far till this day, she has not been wrong about an event she has predicted. Maybe not exactly correct about all the little details, but that the event will happen. The event does indeed eventually end up happening. There was one major experience that really left her terrified, and in which she remembers in detail. It happened when she was still very young. In her own words, this is what she shared. During this time, I had moved in with a boyfriend and his cousin. We had set up the downstairs basement in her house for us to live in. Now, before this terrifying experience happened, the uncle of my then boyfriend was a quote-unquote santero, which is a person who specifically practices the religion of worshiping saints. I remember his uncle telling me that someone had put a curse on me, a curse in which I will never have a stable relationship with a man ever. Now, till this day, I actually believe this curse was placed on me. He told me that they had attached to me an evil spirit who they claimed was a mixture of a man and a woman. And this specific spirit was in charge of making sure that I could never have a stable relationship with any man I was with. Because of this, his uncle, being very experienced in this religion, decided to give me what he called a protection, a force or being that was going to protect me from this evil spirit. The protection he placed on me was a native Taino Indian from the island. At least that was how he appeared to them. At that point, I could not see or hear this protection being. After that, I remember there was one night, me and my then boyfriend had laid down to sleep, and I all of a sudden could clearly hear someone in the room tell me, "We are waiting for him to fall asleep so we can choke you." I tried my best to speak or move, and I simply couldn't. I tried to get my boyfriend's attention the best I could, but I could not move or make a sound. Somehow, I gathered as much strength as I could possibly gather and I eventually managed to scream at the top of my lungs. I then could move again, and I began yelling, "They want to choke me! They want to choke me!" Suddenly, my boyfriend got up asking me what was wrong, and I continued saying to him, "They said they are waiting for you to fall asleep so they can choke me." At that point, he got up and ran upstairs to get his cousin. Now, his cousin was the daughter of his uncle who practiced the saint religion. They both came downstairs, and immediately she called her father. Her father started telling her what she needed to do to help me. He explained this was happening to me because of the evil man/woman spirit that had attached itself to me. She started repeating some words that her father was saying for her to repeat, and then suddenly she called for the spirit to come into her, and then suddenly she completely collapsed onto the floor. She started writhing on the floor as if she was a snake. Afterwards, her husband got on the phone and started to pray and trying to get this evil spirit out of her. I was totally shitting myself, sitting in a corner of the room we were in, completely in shock and terrified. I didn't even know what the hell to do. I remember him telling us, "Don't call her by her name. Do not say her name." He explained to us that since this spirit is inside of her, she does not know her own name. Do not tell her her own name. The moment she can tell us what her own name is, we know that she has come back to us. Ask her. Ask her what her name is. Her husband began to ask her, "What is your name?" She would then laugh in a very strange and slow tone, and then say, "I don't have to tell you my name. You already know it." He would then repeat, "But tell me who you are. What is your name?" Again, she would laugh in this terrible, mockingly slow laugh and repeat, "I don't have to tell you my name. You already know it." We continued on like this for a very long while. Meanwhile, my boyfriend's uncle continued chanting and praying on the phone, and then suddenly, she finally said her own name. We knew then she was back in control of herself. After this, we all left the house together in a van. We entered the van in which my boyfriend's uncle was also there, and we are all completely silent in the van. Out of nowhere, his uncle turns to me and yells my name and starts to chant in tongues, not saying anything that I could understand. I was again shitting myself, and I look over at my boyfriend, and he makes a motion for me to remain quiet and allow for his uncle to finish speaking. I didn't know what the hell was going on. A little bit later, I asked my boyfriend's cousin what her father was doing. She told me her father had been talking to the protection native Indian because apparently the Indian was asking him if I was okay. After this, we had went over to his uncle's house, and when I was going to walk through the door, right in the doorway was what appeared to me as the Indian protector. I remember I could see him clearly and could even see the feathers on his head that followed some sort of pattern and hung down his side. He stood there and waited for me to walk through the doorway. It was as if he was waiting for me so that he could accompany me from then on. This was the only and last time I saw the native Indian protector. This experience was completely real and true, and I will never forget it. It happened many years ago when I was very young, but I can still remember absolutely everything that happened. Hello, listeners. Thank you for listening to this special edition of True Paranormal Ghost Stories as you live the horror with me. Once again, I would like to extend a thank you to all of my listeners who have kept up with every episode of this series so far. I truly appreciate your support. If you would like to submit some of your own true ghost stories to be narrated in a future episode, check the link in the description down below and send them over to my email. Please don't forget to subscribe and click on the notification bell to keep up with future episodes. Thanks for listening. I am your host, Marie Lives the Horror.